is RebelKitty, and welcome back to my geekdom. Today, we are going to be talking about House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 6. So crazy to me, we are this far along in the season. I cannot believe it. Just crazy stuff. Crazy stuff is happening. So, we're going to get into talking about that. Before I do, again, I am coming to you from my kitchen, not from my sewing room, because, again, I told you about my little accident here at the house last week, so I'm going to be going to my orthopedic doctor tomorrow and finding out, hopefully, what all is going on. I've been in a good amount of pain, and the other side of my ankle is now starting to swell, so rather than my ankle getting better in about the week that since this happened, it's getting worse. So I don't know what that means, but hopefully tomorrow I'll find out. So didn't really want to mess with climbing the stairs, so hence my location again this week. But I hope you all are enjoying this series. I am having a blast making it. Would love to hear and see comments from you all. Don't forget, if you like this, please hit the like or hit the little bell icon to subscribe to my channel. That would really help me out. I would love that so much. But please feel free to leave comments. I love responding to comments from folks. So if you like this, or if you agree or even disagree with me, like I said, please leave a comment. I love to converse with people. I just ask that we keep it positive. And don't do personal attacks, please. That's the only thing I'll ask. But I know you guys that watch my channel, y'all are nice. So, okay, so now we're gonna get into it. Season 2, Episode 6. Let's get started. Okay, so the episode starting out with some very interesting things. I'm going to start with the Greens in the Green Council, which of course, my boy Aemond, the Prince Regent, is now seated at the head of the table. And let's just say we find Aemond's in a mood. When is he not, y'all? I mean, but God love him. But he's in a little bit of a mood. And he's upset that he's being summoned for lack of terms. And he's like, how dare they summon me? And you can see from this scene, he has a very different leadership style than Aegon. To me, this scene just really is in your face, that compared to Aegon, who is first in line to the throne, who never really wanted the job, was kind of like, what am I doing here? But still wanted to hear advice from his counselors. Aemon's like, no, it's black or it's white. It's my way or the highway. This is what you people are going to do. And there is no conversation. It is his word's law, and there you go. So some interesting conversation comes up. They talk about treating with the basically the pirates of Westeros, about smashing through the blockade. At one point, Larys thinks he's going to be named Hand of the King, and he starts, you can see Larys kind of congratulating himself, and he's like, but no. Aemon's like, no, I don't want you as my hand. I want you to go and fetch Sir Otto, his grandfather, and bring him back to the Red Keep so he could sit as hand for Aemond, which I think is a pretty wise choice, to be perfectly honest. So we're going to see, who knows how that's going to play out. But he's upset at the Maester for being late, and doubly upset when the Maester informs him that Aegon has kind of come out of this unconsciousness, and he's able to speak and is conscious, albeit for short periods of time. He also sends Lannister on this wild entreaty with the pirates, and then has a very interesting conversation with Alicent at the end of the council meeting. Before that, he does send Sir Christian to Harrenhal. He sends him on the way, which he said is about a 2-week ride to Harrenhal. So it's going to be interesting to see if Christian Cole with the Green Army gets to Harrenhal before at the end of the season. Maybe that will be the last episode. I don't know. But once the council concludes, he asks Alicent to stay behind. And he basically relieves her of her seat on the Green Council, which, I mean, you can tell this is a major, major blow and slap in the face to Alicent. She's very, calm, but you can tell inwardly she's just seething. She makes the point that, I have experience. I sat on the council on behalf of your father when he became ill. And, he basically shuts her down and was like, I don't want to hear it. You need to turn your time to domestic matters, kind of thing. And you could tell this really just gets Alicent, but unfortunately there's nothing she can do at this point. Aemon's Prince Regent, and basically his word is law at this point. So it was a very interesting scene. She tries to talk to him. It's really interesting. She brings up and says, hasn't, the injustices you've suffered as a boy, hasn't that debt been paid, kind of thing, and trying to get to Aemon, or to him, to his heart, or what's left of his heart, and he's just having none of it. He shuts her down. She tries to stroke his face. He removes her hand from his face and was like, be gone. So yeah, I feel bad for Alicent. I mean, as a woman in this world, she is, of course, looked upon as a second-class citizen. And, I really feel bad for her for that. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, girl, are you really surprised? I mean, you're not dumb, but your sons are obviously crazy. And so didn't you see growing up, both of them, Aegon and Aemon, I mean, after everything that has happened, I mean, couldn't you figure this out, that this was going to happen? But, apparently she didn't. She seemed kind of shocked and put out at Aemon. So it's going to be interesting to see. After this scene concludes, we do see Aemon does go visit Aegon in the king's bedchambers. I gotta tell you, like I said, Aemon is in his villain era, and I am here for it personally. But even at this scene, I was like, okay, Aemon, sweetie, maybe we just not need to be so creepy. But he goes to see Aegon, and he puts the marble sphere of kingship that they normally set in the meeting table in Aegon's hand, and was telling him, oh, you need to rest. And of course he's putting it and squeezing his hand on his bad burn side, and you can kind of see Aegon, groaning and wincing in pain. And the maester comes in, and Aemon says, I'm trying to check on my brother, brotherly love and all. But it's like, no, I really do feel that he's trying to say, oh no, he needs to be sedated. I think Aemon is going to ride this Prince Regent wave for as long as he can. And basically we hear the maester say later on in the episode that they give Aegon milk of the poppy, which causes him to sleep 9 out of every 10 hours of the day, which means he's conscious maybe 2 to 3 hours every day. So this is very possible part of the plan of Aemon's. We'll see. Aegon claims, or at least tells Aemon, that he remembers nothing when Aemon presses him about what he remembers of the Battle of Rook's Rest. And he even says, you fought Rhaenys and Meleys. And again, Aegon says, I remember nothing. So I'm wondering, is Aegon telling the truth, or is he understanding, Aemon's after him at this point? Or is he, truly can't remember? But I thought it was interesting that Aemon was trying to, figure out exactly what Aegon remembered as part of the battle. So very interesting scenes setting up or swirling around the newly imagined Green Council and King's Landing. Okay, switching over to the side of the Blacks, we see Rhaenyra at her council table. They're on Dragonstone, meeting with her Black Council, and she reveals that her and Jace have been successful in finding a, quote, dragon seed. It's actually one of her Kingsguard. And she said, that hers something like his great-great-grandmother was a Targaryen princess, so he has Targaryen blood, so it's very possible he would be able to claim a dragon. So she asked him if he's willing to do this, and she even says, you know, to try to claim a dragon means you have to make peace in yourself that it may mean death. And he said, you know, he bows before Rhaenyra and says, you know, you're my queen, I will do anything you ask, which I thought was, you know, very noble of him, if not a little crazy. But the next scene we see, they're in the dragon pit with the dragon masters. They're singing to the dragons to bring a dragon forward. I think it is Sea Smoke who comes forward. It's kind of hard for me to tell some of them apart, but I think it's Sea Smoke that comes forward. And you can see Sea Smoke is trying to like check everything out, you know, hey, what's going on here? Because obviously he doesn't have a rider right now. You know, good on you, sir, for trying to do this, but I had a feeling it was going to end the way it ended. So they call the dragon forward. At first you think, oh, he kind of, you know, calms down and kind of dips his shoulder down, and you see the saddle and the knight approaches, but then as soon as he gets up to the dragon, I honestly believe, senses his fear and shoots him with fire, and the man is burned to death, which is really unfortunate, and you can see the absolute horror on Rhaenyra's face. So it seems, I think she's beginning to realize her and Jace's plan of finding these dragon seeds may not be as easy as what they think. That, hey, we'll just find somebody with a drop of Targaryen blood or Valerian family blood, and they'll be able to become instantly this dragon rider. I think they're figuring out, you know, it's a little more complicated than that, and there's other factors that you have to consider, like how far back is the ancestor. You know, I think we'll see that play out in the show. I think we have already in this episode. But, you know, it was a very interesting scene to kind of set up that storyline. Keeping with the Blacks, we're going to switch over and go to Harrenhal. Again, we see Daemon being crazy. And his descent into madness to continuing. But I have to say, y'all, I was like, yay, when I saw this. Paddy Constantine came back as a cameo for King Viserys, and I was just so excited to see him back in that costume, see him back sitting on the Iron Throne. That was just an amazing, amazing cameo. I had a feeling that, you know, he may pop up, but I was like, oh, I don't want to get too hopeful. But I loved what he brought to that character. And just Paddy just seems like, you know, he's an amazing actor. He seems like an amazing person. And he just breathed life into King Viserys. So to see him back in action again, that did my heart good. And to see him interacting with Daemon again, you got to see a little bit of that brotherly affection that, you know, in life, they were at odds with one another, but in a way, I feel like Daemon made his peace with that in a way. You see him embracing his brother at one point over the body of their mother, after the horrifying episode last week, in that regard. So to see that, and to see that, you know, them coming to terms, or at least on Daemon's end, coming to terms with that was really just amazing to see. And I'm glad that they brought Paddy back long enough to kind of tie a bow on that storyline. I thought that was very smart. And then he does have also an encounter with Alice. You all know I love Alice. I love the character. I was so excited to see her again. And it seemed like Daemon was like, I've had enough. I am getting out of Dodge. You know, but she stops him by the weirwood tree, and she's like, aren't you going to tell me goodbye? And they have this conversation about, you know, what does it mean to rule? You know, why did your brother not choose you? There was probably a reason. that he saw qualities in you that he leaned toward Rhaenyra, kind of thing. So it was good to see her. I thought it was a very nice touch that they, at the end of the scene, they had her catch a barred owl that she called to, and it came to her hand, because in the episode that we meet her, she said that she's a barred owl trapped in human form. So I thought that was a nice little circle back. And then we learn later that Alice is actually called to go to forget the name of the castle. I'm sorry. But one of the landed lords that Damon was trying to treat with there in the Riverlands, who was older, Oscar Frey, I believe it was. There's Oscar and Kermit and what's the other one? Forget the other one. But he was the older gentleman, and he was very near the end of his life. And so Alice, they said, was called to go over there to kind of treat him and administer him, but he ended up dying. So when Damon learns this, Damon has this look on his face like, is this really natural causes, or did Alice have a hand in the River Lord's demise? So who knows? I have a feeling she probably had some workings with it, but that remains to be seen. But interesting scenes always happening at Harrenhal, and yeah, I think Damon will continue to descend into madness until he gets away from there. A couple other interesting scenes that were included in this episode surrounded the small folk of King's Landing. You really could get the sense that, unfortunately, the poorer people, or the poor classes of King's Landing, is really starting to suffer due to the blockade. You see Hugh the Hammer trying to find food for his family. We know his young daughter is sick through past episodes. And people are having a hard time finding food. So there's a bit of unrest. And I think Rhaenyra and then her Whisperer is going to have a hand in a scene that we're going to see later at the end of this episode, using the small folk to really kind of speak out against the Greens. But we also see, in the inn, we see Yulf the White. He's a bit of a cranky individual, but he's upset at the current state of affairs. And the conversation we see is also helped along by the brothel madam that we've seen with Aemond a few episodes before. And she's complaining about how, riches are flowing within the Red Keep, but nothing is coming down to the small folk. She said that some of her girls, for lack of a better word, was called to the castle the last few nights because there was feasting and toasting the new Prince Regent. Aemon, of course, in this instant. So basically, it sounds like the folks in the Red Keep are having a high time and partying up, while the people, the poorer classes, the small folk, as they're called in the series, are really truly suffering. So these couple scenes provide an interesting glimpse into this, and I think this hunger, this want, this need that many people are really showing to have is really going to come back and bite the Greens in the backside, the proverbial backside. Because, the small folk in King's Landing will only stay silent for only so long. This is very Game of Thrones. This is very true to the series, I think, how they portrayed this. But you can really tell there's some unrest, and I'm sorry, y'all, when people get hungry, they're gonna have to find a way to live. They're gonna have to find a way to eat. And we even see in one of the scenes featuring Hugh the Hammer, there's a cart full of sheep being driven down the streets of King Landing on the way to the Red Keep in order to feed the dragons. And people were saying, well, if you have these sheep to feed your dragons, why aren't you feeding the people here, the small folk, the people whose your living is built upon? So very interesting scenes that we see here with the small folk. One other scene that I would be very neglected to talk about if I don't is the scene that we see of Alan of the White on the beach, and he's there. You think he's probably going to gather shells or mussels or some fish perhaps to eat, and you see sea smoke come, and he's circling overhead, and he he's calling, and I think he's calling to Alan, and or excuse me, Alan of Hall, and he's looking up in the sky, and he swoops down next to Alan, and Alan is afraid, and rightly so. I mean, it's a big dragon, and so he runs away from the beach and off into the woods, and you think Alan gets away until he tumbles down his back, and he's kind of sitting here crouching, and pretty soon Sea Smoke swoops down, and the last that we see them, they're looking face to face at one another. And you think, oh, what's going to happen? Is it going to be like before? Is he going to roast the guy? Or what's going to go on? Well, we find out at the very, very end of the episode that one of the guards reports to Rhaenyra that Sea Smoke has been spotted with a new rider. So from that, it is not absolutely confirmed, but from that bit, I'm inferring from that Sea Smoke does have a new rider, and it's going to be Alan of Hall. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Hopefully we'll see that next episode. But if this is true, that means Alan of Hall is truly a dragon seed who can ride one of the Targaryen dragons, which is so cool to think about. Another scene that we see over in Dragonstone is between Rhaenyra and Mysaria, her master of whispers. They have basically hatched a plot to try to get food delivered to the small folk of King's Landing. We see in a scene someone coming in to deliver the message of Mysaria that, quote, the package has been delivered, which I thought was interesting. And we see a gentleman down by the beach, and he sees all these boats coming ashore with a black sail with the red Targaryen dragon sigil on it, so from Rhaenyra, and it's baskets full of food, fresh food that is not molded, like we've seen in the markets of King's Landing. So having Rhaenyra and Mysaria talk about this and talking about the implications and what that will mean, I thought was a very well constructed scene. We also get a little bit of Mysaria's backstory. She tells Rhaenyra how she got the scar on her throat that Rhaenyra had asked about before, and what had happened to her. And this was an interesting scene. It's got a lot of talk and a lot of chatter about it on the internet. But I think both of them find a kindred spirit and a kindred soul in each other. That, yes, both of them are women, howbeit very different backgrounds. Their upbringings were very, very different, quite at the opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think both Rhaenyra and Mysaria realize and recognize in each other that, even though we're from how we were raised, we're two different worlds, we're still more alike than what we might first meets the eye. Both are women, both are thrust into existences that are out of the norm. So I think finding that kindred soul in one another, I also feel like just different comments Rhaenyra made through this episode. I think she's kind of given up on Daemon at this point. I mean, I don't know how much time has elapsed since the beginning of the season to now. It seems like several weeks at least has passed by, but there has been no word from Daemon at Harrenhal about anything that is going on, just from things that they're told and kind of hear. So I think she's coming to this realization. I think she's looking for an ally. I think she's looking for someone who she can lean on, kind of like she did lean on Daemon to help her, in the first season, and to kind of be her sounding board. And, one can argue maybe Daemon had his own reasons why he did what he did by marrying Rhaenyra. But I think this bond between Rhaenyra and Mysaria is born out of that need. So I thought it was a very interesting scene to include in this episode. So the episode concludes with Alicent and Helena, my girl Helena, going to the Sept to pray. Alicent said that they need to go and light a candle for all the ones they have lost. So her and Helena go together. While they're there, this riot starts to happen and take place within King's Landing. We see Kingsguard come in to the Sept to get Alicent and Helena, and he tells them, we need to leave, and we need to leave right now. There's something that's happening. You're in a bit of danger, and we need to get you out of here. So we see them both come out of the Sept, and as they're coming out of the Sept and down the stairs, they're being crowded in by the people of King's Landing. And these are the small folk. I think these are the same people that unfortunately, gave Helena much consternation during the funeral scene when they paraded baby Jaharis through the streets. And she had her meltdown moment, and rightly so. I think all those feelings and those memories come washing back to her, and she really does have this panicked moment. They sweep down the stairs and run after Alicent and Helena, and at one point push them both up against a wall. And it's interesting, how the people were crowded around them, but they still had guards. And it's like, I'm sitting here going, where are the guards? Where are these people? You see one or two trying to help, but the others are just kind of standing around. And I'm like, are those Aegon's buddies that he appointed to the King's Guard, and now they don't know what to do or what their job is, or don't want to protect these women? And I'm screaming at the TV, help them. You got to come help them. I mean, it's your job, So unfortunately for one of the loyal King's Guards, he gets attacked by the crowd and is overwhelmed, and they start kicking and beating him, and he's basically left there in the street. We don't really know his fate. One would assume he is killed. But they eventually, a couple of the other guards swoop in and get Alicent and Helena and get them back to one of the will houses and put them inside. We see that Alicent gets a cut in her arm, ironically, in almost the same location where she slashed Rhaenyra last season with the cat's paw dagger, which I thought was a very interesting choice to include. But we see both Alicent and Helena, especially my poor girl Helena, they're very, very shaken by all of this, but they finally get back to the house and they whisk them away and whisk them out of there. So I think there's a lot of unrest that is starting to boil over. I think the small folk have had it at this point. They're hungry. Of course, the episode before, Aemon gave the order to close the gates, so obviously they cannot get in and out of King's Landing at their will to try to find food. So I think we're just going to continue to see this unfold. I mean, at one point in the crowd, they're chanting "Down with the Greens," and I'm sorry, but the Greens don't need this right now. This is bad publicity and bad PR. So they really need to think long and hard about what their next steps are going to be. So I thought that was a very interesting scene that they included for the conclusion of this episode, and seeing how this this tumult starts to boil over basically in the streets. So that is a wrap of my recap of episode 6 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So what do you all think? I'm interested to hear. I thought personally that this episode was classic Game of Thrones. It had intrigue. It had excitement. It had adventure. It had tense, scenes. It had scenes where you really went, oh my gosh. And then I was overjoyed when I saw Paddy Considine again as King Viserys. So it had a little bit of everything. So what do you think? What do you think that they're going to do next? What do you think the small folk are going to do in response to this riot? Do you think the riot is going to continue to grow and there's more unrest that's going to happen? How do you think Rhaenyra is going to respond? Are they going to try to find more dragon scenes? Are they going to try again to get dragon riders? Granted, they had kind of disastrous results in this episode, but what do you think is going to happen? We only have 2 more episodes left of this season, which is hard to believe, and it breaks my heart in a way, because it's like, no, it can't be over yet. But I think they have a lot of ground to cover in those 2 episodes, so it'll be interesting to see. Again, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And also, if you could subscribe, hitting that little bell icon down below so you hear anytime I post a video in the geekdom. I know I didn't have any Game of Thrones stuff. I have a Star Wars shirt on today, but I have my little drinky drink off camera of my Sprite here. But I do have my wooden Targaryen coaster that my Sprite is sitting on. So I know it was kind of hard to see off camera, but I have to have a little something of my chosen house, even though they're crazy, here with me at all times. So hope you all are doing well and staying creative. And until next time, peace, love, and dragons.